This is Vince Russo's The Brand.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Wrestling with Tragedy, case number 103. This week, Ric Flair, the plane crash, 1975. We're going to be taking a deep dive into this case and into this incident that occurred. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to the table, which is Wrestling with Tragedy. First up, I am the dad bod god himself, the bald, the beard, the fucking beautiful Piers Austin. And once again, I am joined by the suntan Superman, the ECW original, the Kingpin, Angel motherfucking Medina, and also the two-man power trip himself, the third man in on the Wrestling with Tragedy team, the silver tongue lizard, Mr. John Poz. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Hello, hello.
So you're saying he has a forked tongue? I knew he was shady.
Whoa, whoa.
You said you had the lizard, you had a forked tongue.
But gentlemen, before we go any further, let's take a quick second to thank some of those sponsors. Angel, take it away.
For all you fans out there who definitely into sports, definitely check out sleeves.com, man. It's a definitely great website that gives you all your necessities in the field of any athletic sport. It has arm sleeves, headbands, but definitely got the dirty boxes. Just check them out. It's definitely a benefit in the bedroom. Use promo code NWA Pod for 10% off. John Paws wears them. I wear them. 10% off NWA Pod, sleeves.com.
And also check out healthvape.com. All your healthy vitamin, vital, restore, boost energy. These products, all of it is no nicotine, no addictive, harmful chemicals, and they are vitamin infused. So use promo code MWAPOD to get a 10% discount on your final purchase. So, gentlemen, this week we're covering off the 1975 plane crash, which, contained Ric Flair, which almost ended the career of one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. Gentlemen, what a case that we're about to dive into.
Okay. Well, I mean, definitely, man. This is the time when Ric Flair was at his prime. He was I'm not saying top of his game. I mean, he was just still getting into the business, I'm saying. But I mean, it was a twin-engine plane that was flying from like Charlotte to Wilmington, North Carolina. I think Greg Valentine's father was on the plane, if I recall. John, I mean, can you elaborate on who was on the plane as well? I can't remember.
David Crockett, Johnny Valentine, Bobby Bruggers, and Tim Woods, and obviously the pilot. We're all on the plane. I just actually not that long ago interviewed David Crockett. We were talking a little bit about the plane crash. Pretty freaking scary if you think about it. I mean, those planes in general are kind of dangerous as it is, but man, when you're running low on fuel or you know what I mean, like you never know with those kind of planes, and maybe you have too many guys on there. Those small private planes, crazy.
Oh, I mean, look at it. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it is a scary situation. I mean, you're flying a two-engine plane, single-engine plane. I mean, look at the people who passed away. I mean, I'm talking about Richie Valiant, Big Bopper, Buddy Holly, who died in a plane crash similar. Also, Patsy Cline. I'm not a country person, but she died in a plane crash, and I don't know if it was two-engine or single-engine. But when that engine conks out, and when it's a scary situation because you're coasting in the air trying to see if you can land in a cornfield somewhere to make sure, and some people don't make it, and it puckers your asshole. I mean, absolutely.
One of the things I found interesting about this was that because of the size of the wrestlers on board, the reason why they ran out of fuel was the pilot actually decided to dump some of the fuel because the plane couldn't handle the weight and didn't actually distribute the wrestlers accordingly on the plane to distribute the weight.
Well, I'm not a pilot. I'm not familiar in regards to the weight. I never got on a single engine plane. I mean, so I don't know what factor they need to determine. Like, do they ask you for your weight before you get on to determine the calibration for that type of?
They're supposed to.
Okay.
I mean,
I've heard of like where the pilot. I've heard of it before, where the pilot will literally say like, "All right, what's everybody's weight?" He figures out the weight, he distributes them, and he sits them on the plane. And it's like, okay, we have too much weight. You can't bring your bags. You have too much weight. One person can't come, or like, you know what I mean? They figure it out. This guy apparently was like, all right, I'm not going to figure out the weight, but I know it's a little bit too much. Hey, you know what? I'll just dump out the gas, which was obviously a huge fatal mistake.
Absolutely.
dumping out gasoline and you're making your trip. I know they almost made it to the Wilmington runway, but still, huge mistake.
Man, I'm just wondering if it was the pilot looking at Pierce, he'd be like, you know what, I figured it out. Here's money for an Uber.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Angel. But it was actually Valentine who was sitting next to the pilot, and Valentine was actually the US heavyweight champion at the time for Crockett Promotions. But he actually turned around and noticed that the fuel gauge was like on empty, and turned around and said to everyone else, "Hey, guess what? We're out of fuel."
Pretty damn scary.
Yeah. Like, that's a scary thing to fucking hear when you're on on any type of airplane. Hey, one of the engines was about to conk out. You know, that's some wild shit. Like, that's some like religious type experience you're about to go through right there.
Well, I mean, John, just curiosity, since you did interview Crockett, what was his what did he say? What did he feel like when the pilot announced, "Gentlemen, we're out of fuel"? Like, what was his first thoughts? Like, this is it. I need, I should have made a will, or, we can make this.
He said he was scared as hell. He definitely thought they weren't going to make it. He said scariest thing of his life. And every year on that day, he always calls Ric Flair, who's a good buddy of his, and he always says, "Thank God we're alive. God was with us that day." Always something to like remind him that he's lucky enough to survive, because he thought when Johnny Valentine said that they're out of gas, he thought they were done for sure. And he just, thanks his lucky stars every day on that day that it happened on October 4th. He goes back and kind of relives those horrible memories, but he thanks God that he's alive. And he said how lucky that they were to survive, and how lucky, to Ric, and Ric, says it back to him, insanely lucky that they survived that.
Now, when Johnny Valentine was alive, was he also reaching out to him during the anniversary as well, or was it just Ric?
No, I think it was just Ric. As far as what he told me, it was just kind of Ric, as him and Ric were thick as thieves. They were best buddies. They were good friends for years. Still are good friends. So okay. I don't know about if it was Johnny Valentine, but he only mentioned really reaching out to Ric, and then kind of not celebrating, but mentioning the anniversary of the horrible incident, that they're still alive.
I didn't know if it was a tradition to reach out to all the survivors, like Tim Woods and Ric Flair and Johnny Valentine, and they all like got at a bar and drank to celebrate their survival, because the pilot was the one that died. Tim Woods walked away without a I'm not saying he was without a scratch, but he walked away compared to how everybody else ended up.
But the pilot didn't die straight away, did he? Like, he was in a coma for like a year.
Yeah, he was in a coma, but he died. He's the only one that died.
Yeah.
So that's what I was just... Hey man, when you're in the front of that plane, man, I mean, joking around. I mean, movies, you always see the glass breaking, trees slapping inside the plane and stuff like that. You get fucked up. Branch hits you in the face, something hits you. I don't know how he died. I mean, I know he died in the plane crash, but what was the major factor? Was it trauma to the chest? Did he hit his chest? Did he hit his head? Did something impale him? There's just so many variables. I don't know the whole how he died. I mean, John, do you know that?
No, they said he was in a coma for a while, but I'm not sure. It had to be some sort of injury from the crash, but I don't know exactly. Yeah, exactly what it was. Yeah.
Because the pilot was Joseph Farkas, and it was a 28-year-old Vietnam veteran, but actually he had trouble getting the plane off the ground in Charlotte because of the combined bulk of the wrestlers that were on board. Like, he actually had problems getting the plane to take off.
That's when you realize, like, all right, maybe one or two people should drive, or I'll drop them off, I'll come back, or something. You don't take that risk.
And that's the thing, you don't know,
right?
Well, I was just saying, you don't know. I mean, the only person that knows what's going on is the pilot, the weight, figuring out what's going on. Oh, this is too heavy. I'm having difficulty taking off. Everybody else thinks it's just a normal day in the life of flying in the friendly skies,
Yeah.
Pierce.
Yeah.
I was waiting for somebody to chime in.
Every time I go to speak, I get cut off. So I was like, all right, do I go now? But yeah, look, it's one of those things, man. I think once you go through an experience like this, like Ric Flair at the time was 26 years of age, like just really starting his career in the business. Valentine, that pretty much ended his career, I believe. Like he didn't wrestle again after that.
Well, I mean, Nature Boy was 24 years old, starting on the business in during the early NWA's part of the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, he was still not green, but I mean, he had a couple years under his belt, but I could still say he was
Up and
green at the
coming.
time. Yeah, he was still green. I think that's when he was fat, right? When he was all bulked up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he's
was
a
a
little
massive
chubbier
dude.
then. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So he was not even Ric Flair. What was his name, John? He was
Ramblin' Ricky Rhodes.
there you
It's what he
go.
wanted it to be. Yeah. Before he
That's
was Ric Flair. Yeah.
that was horrible.
Yeah.
You
Like a
know.
Rick. Like a Dusty Rhodes wannabe. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's pretty bad. But go ahead anyway. John, up here, she was gonna say.
I was just gonna say, could you imagine if we had the Nature Boy Ramblin' Ricky Rhodes? Like, could the whole stick work with that name?
I don't know if he'd be a main eventer with that name and that gimmick. I doubt it.
No, just curiosity. What was the gimmick? You saying it was a Dusty Rhodes type of gimmick, or was it?
Yeah, it was like he basically was pretending he was like Dusty. He was trying to act like Dusty.
So it was a Dusty Rhodes, gimmick.
Rip off, kind of a gimmick. Yeah, it's kind of a rip off. Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Okay. Well, I mean, he kind of idolized, Dusty. Dusty was already in the business for like quite a while. So, I mean, he was kind of looking up to him. It's kind of funny how he not surpassed Dusty, but kind of like, got to his level or maybe an inch a little bit higher than Dusty. And it's just weird how, those cards play out. But anyway.
Yeah, this guy idolized you and all of a sudden he's surpassing you. It's pretty crazy if you think about it.
Well, Pierce, let me ask you a question in regards to Ric Flair. When he got injured and he broke his back, what was the spinal damage that I mean, he was fucked up because the doctor's like, hey, you won't be able to wrestle again. What was the spinal? What damage did he have?
He broke his spinal cord, I believe, wasn't it? Like he actually broke his spine.
Oh, let me look
like there was a break. That was a break in the spine. I don't think it was an actual back break, but I think it was a spinal break.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you break, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. If you break your
I
back,
mean, the spine is part of I'd assume the spinal bone is part of the backbone, wouldn't it be?
Well, I think it's connected to the hip bone. No, just
and the hip bone's connected to the.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I really don't know, man. I'm not like I said. When you injure your back, is a very, very iffy thing. I mean, it's very hard to determine, like, if you're gonna walk, if you're gonna have issues. I just didn't know how. I mean, I know it's serious, but everything is like different levels. Like a form of dementia, Alzheimer's, even that disease that Bruce Willis has is all different versions of some type of dementia. But which is the worst, which is the least, even though they all suck. So I was just wondering how that works out.
Yeah, no, I believe the actual diagnosis was he broke his spine.
Excuse me, John. Do you know any story about the back injury?
I just know he was out for 6 months. I always saw a broken back. I don't know if it was spine, but had to be obviously something of that nature. Out for 6 months, rehab, and came back, and just and everyone noticed he always had that calcium deposit, which was built up in his back. He had that little bubble, and you always saw that was there, which is nothing really, but
it's like a cyst.
Crazy. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Crazy to think that he came back in 6 months from broken.
But you know
what's funny though? Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say everyone on the plane suffered back injuries.
And that's what I was gonna bring up. Johnny Valentine. Well, I was gonna say didn't walk away. And that's what I was saying. What kind of traumatic injury did he have on his spinal in his back? Sorry for stuttering. Compared to Rick. Like, because was it the position where they were sitting on the plane? I mean, there's just a lot of factors. Like, what the fuck? How did he walk away? Kind of, sort of, and he's in a wheelchair.
Well, David Crockett. I was going to say David Crockett was the only one who didn't sustain an injury to the back. Like his injury, his extent of his injuries, nothing was back related. John, is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. He was lucky somehow. I don't know how, but he somehow got super lucky, and obviously Bobby Bruggers and Johnny Valentine's career was over from it.
I mean, it's pretty interesting. I mean, like I said, it's just Johnny Valentine, not be able to walk again. I mean, he was at I think he was at the top of his game during that. Wasn't he a champion? Wasn't he the U.S. champion? And I mean, it's just that. I mean, it's just weird, man, how that played out. But anyway, with regards to the cyst on his back, I mean, I noticed that when I was watching Ric Flair, he always landed on his side when he took back drops and he took hip tosses and his shoulder. Was it because of his injury, or was that the style of his wrestling?
I always thought that it played up to the injury. I always thought that played a part into where he didn't really want a flat back bump. And he did have several shoulder surgeries and injuries from kind of landing on his shoulder so much. But it's interesting because you're kind of taught flat back bump. And obviously, Andrew, you know this more than us, but every other guy kind of does that. And he always did that thing for his shoulder. I think subconsciously it was always to protect his back.
But you know what's funny? I always took a side bump, but I never landed on my shoulder. I always landed like on my side away from my shoulder. So I always landed like this part right here so I could slap out. I always fell that way, but I never hit my shoulder. I always hit on the side and I slapped out.
So that's not a weird thing that how he landed and stuff. Like if you're in the ring with someone like that, you wouldn't be looking at him going like, this motherfucker doesn't know how to like take a bump.
No, it's just the comfort. You learn the proper way to take a back bump. Then you tweak it to, like what we say in wrestling, you tweak it to fit your style, what you feel more comfortable with. Look, I feel better this way. Yeah, you might take a bad bump sometimes if the guy throws you up and you flip instead of letting you take your own bump and stuff like that. I mean, it depends on who's throwing you. But I always took a side fall. I always ended up that way. I always, didn't understand why I never did the flat bump. I always did the side fall. I always ended up in that position. Because I guess when I always posted one hand on the guy's. It was always, it was one hand, my left hand on top of his head, one hand on his shoulder. So when I posted up and when I flew over, this hand was already ready to slap out. And I landed on that side. It's science, man. It's physics. Yeah. Everybody finds out their own little niche in the ring. I mean, so that's why I was wondering if that was Ric Flair's style of side bumping, or is it because the injury that if he kept landing on his back flat, that it would inflame the spine, and that's why
I always thought it was like a subconscious thing with his back. That's what I always thought.
Have you guys seen the differences in matches that Flair had prior to the plane crash, and then like obviously the afterward everyone's seen, but have you guys ever seen like his matches prior to the plane crash? Like what was his style of work back then?
No, I never really paid attention. I really noticed. I was born in '72, so when that happened, I was still a kid. But I'm just saying, even as the years went on, I mostly focused on Ric Flair after, like I said, when I first got into the business. When Clash of Champions versus him and Sting. I mean, that was my introduction to Ric Flair. So anything from that point up was when I was all into Ric Flair's, Four Horsemen and stuff like that. Anything prior, I don't even know if there's any footage, if I recall, of Ric Flair in 1975. John, is there?
There is footage. I haven't rarely seen hardly any of it. I'm obviously more familiar with stuff post that, but I do have a couple buddies, older guys that are in their 60s that always said like, oh, he was great, or he was, you could tell that he was going to be the next guy, and he was so great. And this is him starting in the early 70s.
Well,
and they grew up in the mid-Atlantic, so like I guess 75-ish or 74-ish is when he started kind of coming into his own. I had a few with Wahoo McDaniel. They always talk about, oh, he was great, and then he became even greater.
Well, I'm looking right now to see if there is any type of matches during that era on YouTube. So I'm looking right now.
And even like the old school WWF days and stuff like that, like with Bruno Sammartino matches and matches with Buddy Rogers and stuff like them, they were all house shows. Like there was nothing really televised back then.
Okay, there's one match. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There is one match I'm looking at right now. It's Ric Flair versus Chris Taylor, AWA 1974, 1 year prior to the plane crash. So it's a 4-minute video. So so there is footage of him wrestling prior to my introduction.
I haven't seen much of that.
Yeah, that's the only one I see.
Because when did he become the Nature Boy?
Well, it looks like he was heavier here in 1974. Swede Hansen versus Ric Flair. This was Swede Hansen versus Ric Flair, 1974, for old 8mm Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling house show footage of 74. So he looked like Ric Flair in this one. So it's pretty interesting. So, but again, I don't know if he was acting like Ric Flair or it just physically looked like Ric Flair, but his style wasn't Ric Flair at the time. So, yes, so there's footage. Go ahead, Pierce.
No, it was just interesting because it's like I always enjoy the wanting to go back and have a look at some of the real old school type of stuff, like from like the 60s, 70s, you know what I mean? Like that sort of generation, I feel like a lot of that stuff is kind of missed. Like you don't get to see it.
It's kind of hazy, but he was a little bit heavier,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know who was tag team. I don't know, but that's Ric Flair right there. See how thick he is? So his rambling. Yeah, so I mean, even his style is different. He's not doing the Ric Flair gimmick. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, like I said, you can see how he evolved into Ric Flair compared to what he looked like here.
And it's interesting to kind of look and see, like, okay, who was like the star before him or the big stars before him in Mid Atlantic in that territory for like JCP and stuff. Blackjack Mulligan, Wahoo McDaniel, Johnny Valentine. Obviously, Valentine gets hurt, but like those were the guys. Ole Anderson, those were the guys that kind of came up before him that he kind of looked up to, and obviously was friends with them as well. But that's like almost like those were the guys that created Ric Flair, who would eventually become the Nature Boy. They almost, put the foundation down for him. But a lot of people almost like skip that generation, which is kind of unfair because there isn't a lot of great footage like that. There's not too much great footage out there of it. And if there is, it's not that great quality. And you gotta like kind of respect those legends that kind of, paved the way for him to become who he was.
Yeah, I can see the greenness in him, and can see there's certain things he's doing that's Ric Flairish. The way he walks, not strutting, but certain ways he's reaching. You can see Ric Flair, but yeah, you could tell he was green. I mean, because the things he was doing. So pretty interesting. If you guys are interested, it is on YouTube. A couple of 1974 matches prior to that incident, so definitely check it out.
I mean, that show, like they were actually flying to a show that afternoon.
Correct.
Which I think was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Could you I was watching this, I think it was a WWE special on it where they actually were interviewing this guy who was like a fan who was in the crowd at the time. And it was like how they basically had an announcement basically saying, hey, there was a plane crash involving Ric Flair, Johnny Valentine, David Crockett, and etc. And then like that, he said at the event, it was like this weird sort of vibe came over the crowd. It's like, I found it strange that WWE would bring in a fan to interview about an incident like that happening. And how the hell would they find someone who was actually at the show?
Well, they do that a lot, kind of. Like I've noticed the curtain call, they have those guys. They have their footage too. They bought the footage from them, but they occasionally do that. I don't know how you kind of prove it. I guess you have to make sure the guy has tickets and find out maybe he actually lived there. You're gonna have to do some background, not just throw anybody out there and just believe his story. So I'm sure they do some sort of background on the guy, or somebody's familiar with them. Who knows? Maybe they're friends with some of the wrestlers, or maybe Flair became friends with them or somebody, and they knew it and they wanted to tell their story, that it was great for the doc. But yeah, that is interesting. Like you interviewing a fan, it's like, all right, these guys had like a deadly, fatal plane crash. The show must go on. Like, let's go and enjoy the show. It's weird.
Well, I mean, after that plane crash, I mean, it took him 6 months to heal. Do you think Ric Flair was kind of worried about him not getting any type of push or lost of where his status was at the time, since it's 6 months later? It's always some new kid coming around like, hey, let's replace him, just like Johnny Valentine. We have to find out the next star, because now Johnny can't wrestle no more, so we have to find somebody who we could build off to make him a star. We have to make money. So what was Ric Flair's mindset at the time? I mean, Jim Crockett must know, because he was friends with Rick. I mean, was he ever showed any stories about his concern of Ric Flair's, like, hey, I don't think I'm going to come back, or I could bounce back from this?
I think that he was thinking that I'm coming back from this plane crash. This is great, like business. You know what I mean? Like I'm making a return after this crash. It's probably going to be me, not maybe in the main event right away, but headed towards the main event. And he went right back in his feud. He had a feud with Wahoo, went right back into feud with Wahoo McDaniel. So I don't know. I don't think he was ever concerned or worried about his spot. Flair always was like overconfident in a lot of ways. And I think, maybe cocky to a certain extent. He never was really worried about his spot. He knew who he was. He knew how good he was. So I don't think he was ever concerned like, oh, I'm going to lose my spot here. But I know a ton of guys that would be, and a ton of guys that they're always kind of paranoid in the business.
I mean, that's kind of weird, because I mean, in the business, I mean, from my standpoint, I mean, I was always worried about my spot, fucking up a situation in a match, or blowing some type of move and you lose your spot. I mean, anytime somebody walks in the freaking locker room, people are like, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? Oh, they're always worried about their spot. So that's why I was just wondering, because back then it was more of and I understand there was territories. There was a lot of place to work. Everybody was busy. It's not compared how it is now. But I still would be worried in regards to, like, keeping my name relevant in the promoter's mouth. Pierce?
I was actually just going to say I've just found a bit of information just to go back, and I just want to clarify. It wasn't his spine that Flair broke; it was his back, and also Woods injured. Basically, one of the things I found interesting here was Crockett's head smashed through the seat in front of him, which busted Woods's ribs, and his mouth ripped open. His right shoulder was Crockett's right shoulder was dislocated. Flair suffered
what?
Sorry?
What happened to his shoulder? What injuries?
Dislocated.
Oh, I didn't hear that part. So
yeah, sorry. Flair had lacerations and a broken back. Bruggers, a former linebacker for the Miami Dolphins and San Diego Chargers, also broke his back.
So just curiosity, do you think the size of the wrestlers, the bulk of them not be able to move around in that plane, kind of like, a mammoth in a small cave, it's just hard to like injure them because there's no, room to bounce around to hurt yourself even more. That's why there's mostly just spinal injuries.
It's a hard thing to really say, man, because like you'd think guys of their size, they would probably be a little bit more protected from injury. Like imagine if it was guys that weren't in that physical shape, like guys like myself and John Poz, for example, how bad worse would the injuries have been? Like these guys were in their peak physical condition at the time.
Well, I'm just thinking like it's like if I put a Big Show, Mark Henry, and the Twin Towers in the back seat of a Volkswagen Bug, and they crashed. Since they're so massive, will they be able to, they'll survive that impact because of that girth,
And it does look like, if you look at the pictures and everything of the plane, it does look like a very tiny plane for all those big guys to be on. So I'm sure, like you're right, it's probably like they're condensed. They're like little sardines in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just curiosity. I mean, like I said, it's just like you're packed like sardines. It's hard for you to bounce off the ceiling, and get more injuries. You're just stable and solid. So I was just always wondering, like I said, never been in a plane crash, don't ever want to, but I just wondered if that was a factor that kind of saved their lives. Pierce,
One of the things I wanted to ask, who would you put the blame of this incident on? The pilot?
Yeah, it's the pilot.
100%.
Pilot's the one that does all the final checks. He's supposed to have a clipboard and check off all the boxes. I mean, there's probably more into that checklist that he has to do, and he is the final say. In regards to when the plane's going to take off and give him the thumbs up. So yeah, it's his fault. He thought he was maybe overconfident. Maybe he's like, "Yeah, we could do this." It's just you get comfortable.
Yeah.
John, what do you think?
Well, 100%, it's got to be on the pilot. But I always think like the way Flair is, he's this party animal. He's a crazy guy. He just doesn't stop. He's 73 years old. He almost died. And then after he came back, he's still, when they told him he can't drink anymore, it's bad for his health, he's still drinking and partying.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Do you think that this incident almost like led to that behavior where it's like, fucking man, I only live once. I almost died. You can't kill me. I'm going to live my life and be happy and just party up. Do you think like that attributes to the lifestyle of him, that like he's like, just fuck it, I almost died, now I'm just going to live every life and just party, like every day's a party?
Well, I mean, absolutely, man. When you live to that, when you get too close to death, regardless of what it is, I mean, car crash, plane crash, almost dying on the operating room table, you do, put your life in perspective in regards like, you only have, one, you may die tomorrow. It's like that old saying, memento mori. You one day you will die. You have to take life to the fullest at the end of that's stoicism, Pierce, if you're wondering. This, Stoics, they believe like you got to take it day by day because you do not know what tomorrow will bring. So, yeah, I mean,
Pretty deep,
absolutely.
Damn, it's pretty deep.
Well, I fucking read, Stoic, and with dealing with Pierce and the stress that he puts me through this podcast, I gotta fucking have some type of fucking vice. I like, I'm Asante, on top of the mountain. But yeah. I mean, I'm definitely, a lot of people find God, and a lot of people find like, hey man, I got to party and sleep with many girls and drink as much liquor. That's why he's always joking around. I spilled so much, I spend more money on spilled liquor, I mean, because your fantasy complements reality. He was probably living that lifestyle that he was saying as a gimmick,
For sure.
Pierce?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, man, I think you go through that sort of experience, man, it really puts a lot of things in perspective as well, man. I think when you see someone who, like Johnny Valentine has their career cut short, seeing the pilot, live in a coma for a year before his passing, I think it definitely gives your life a lot of perspective, and makes you realize not to take shit for granted, man. So that could be the massive instigator of the Nature Boy Ric Flair as we know it.
And just curiosity, man. I mean, if you were in a coma, I mean, I'm just pointing out, let me ask Pierce, if you were in a coma, would you want them to pull the plug, not knowing that you're going to survive? Or would you say, at a certain time, you meant like right now, as we're talking, like, man, if I'm in a coma for like 6 months and fuck it, man, pull the plug, or, ride that horse until you know for sure that you're not going to come back. What
Nah,
would you
man,
do?
I wouldn't want to put my family through that, bro. I would,
All right.
I'd say pull the plug.
Pause.
Yeah, depending on how bad it was, I would think probably pull the plug, but it was depending on how bad how bad you were in shape. If there was no
Well,
brain function or anything, I don't know. You
oh
probably
yeah, I
have to
mean, if
pull the
there's no
plug.
brain
Yeah,
function, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, there's no coming back. But if there's still some form of, you still have brain function, but you're just in a freaking coma, I don't know, man. It depends on the situation. Like I said, brain damage, and but if I'm still functioning, I don't know, man. I want to, I really don't know. I don't know. You're not gonna know if you're dead or alive anyway. But one minute you fall asleep, you're in a coma at 28 and you wake up 68. There's a lot of fucking it's only a blink of an eye, once you wake up. This is the part where you guys talk.
I thought Piers was gonna say something poetic there. After you were being so poetic, I thought Piers
his lips were curving. That's why I was waiting. Like he's gonna say,
it's like he's
speak.
about to say something really prophetic here. Let's hear what's he got.
I was just gonna say, like, if you go through that kind of thing, and I think if you're in a situation, it depends on your quality of life. Like, if I was going to be put in a thing and like, okay, you can come through this, but you're going to be a fucking vegetable, and like your family are going to have to fucking spoon feed you and wipe your ass for the rest of your living days, then fuck that, man. Nah, I don't want to be a fucking burden on people. Fuck that shit. I'll go out.
Just to kind of just change the topic for just a second here. So Flair's in the hospital, right? And
Yeah.
obviously Johnny Valentine, all the guys are in the hospital. Wahoo McDaniel is feuding with Flair at the time, but shows up at the hospital. They actually thought, which is crazy, they thought that he came to the hospital because he was like mad or
To
upset.
finish the
The
job?
kayfabe, to finish the job almost. Like kayfabe lives. Like supposedly the hospital staff was like a little worried. They're like, "Uh-oh, what is he doing here?" Angel, have you, and I know you maybe not because kayfabe was alive and well then, but when you were wrestling, you ever experienced something like that where it's like, okay, the guy's in a hospital bed, his mortal enemy shows up, and the hospital staff thinks like, "Uh-oh, this guy came and he might finish the job, or what is he doing here?" Like they were actually supposedly legitimately worried that Wahoo was going to do something.
Well, yeah, kayfabe was alive back then, man.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
No, I really don't have an answer for that, man. I mean, that's where, yeah, that's a different perspective I would have never thought of. I really don't know, man. I mean, let me ask Pierce's thoughts on that. What would you think? Maybe it
I
would
mean,
spark
it's
some-
1970. It's 1975, bro. The fact that kayfabe is all still alive and well back then, it's like this is a time when, excuse me.
Well, while he's sneezing, I was gonna say, like, you know what? I mean, back then, I mean, Ric Flair was not as known. Maybe people didn't really know. I mean, they know who Wahoo was, but maybe not Rick. You know, I mean,
I think the thing
it's
is, people thought the whole thing was a fucking shoot back then. That's the thing of it, and
Well,
people
even
didn't know it was work. There was no online. There was no, smart marks weren't really a thing back then. There was no online dirt sheets. There was none of this sort of bullshit. So what you saw is what you get. There was no sort of like shoot interviews and stuff like that back in those days. So yeah, man, the fans were just bought into it, hook, line, and sinker.
But even Johnny Valentine was feuding with Tim Woods. He was feuding with Mr. Wrestling at this time. So when Tim Woods walked away from the plane crash, they basically pretended he wasn't even in the plane crash because they didn't want to say that Valentine and him were some riding in the same plane because they were feuding and they didn't want to expose the business. So when Tim Woods, they were saying, "Oh, he was on the plane, he had a crash." He denied it for years. He said he was never on the plane.
No shit.
Yeah, so he outright said he was not on the plane, and that it was Johnny Valentine. So,
Well, just
it's pretty
curiosity, wasn't
interesting.
Mr. But Mr. Tim Woods was Mr. Wrestling. Wasn't he wearing a mask back then? So nobody knew who the hell Mr. Wrestling was. So why would he kayfabe that?
I don't
You
know.
know,
I
that's what
guess
I'm wondering.
he wanted to go that extra mile to kind of not expose the business, I guess, which is crazy. So it's funny. It's
Imagine
like
that you go in you're in a
Wahoo's
plane crash
visiting
and break
Flair in
your
the
back.
hospital, and then Tim Woods is saying he wasn't even on the plane, and that because he was able to walk away and everybody else was injured, so he could kind of get away with it. Pretty crazy how far you go to keep kayfabe back then.
Well, and that's the thing, gal. That's what threw me off because you're like, I was like Tim Woods, Mr. Wrestling. So I'm thinking, even if it was in the paper, pilot's name Tim Woods. Who the fuck is Tim Woods? Now Ric Flair, Johnny Valentine, those names are in the mainstream, So
But
just curious.
but back then you did whatever you could. I mean, that's crazy. You almost die, and you're somehow able to walk away. The other guy breaks his back, and you're like, "Nope, I was never on that plane." Like, pretty crazy. Like the lengths that they went to make sure that people didn't think they were two guys feuding, hanging out together.
No, I agree. That's very I don't know, man. That's very interesting. Why would you kayfabe something that nobody knows who the fuck you are? And so that's kind of like, I'm not saying nobody knows who the fuck you are. It's just that he's under a hood. So that's why I was like, pretty interesting.
It's like Jim Duggan and Iron Sheik on the New Jersey Turnpike getting caught with drugs and stuff. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
that's when
Like
you kayfabe. I wasn't in the car.
you can't keep these guys together. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer right there. But if it's Mr. Wrestling and Hijo de Santo, and they both put in the plane crash, and they say Raul Figuel, whatever on the plane with Tim Woods, nobody's gonna know who the fuck they are. That's what I'm
Yeah.
just saying. It's just I'm just curious about that. But that's weird, man.
What a different way the business was back then, though. Like these guys, man, they would do anything to kind of keep it sacred. Pretty crazy.
Even be on a plane crash, nearly die, break your back, and then deny it happened.
Now, do you think Ric Flair already? You know what I'm saying? I know he said he's going to come back. I know, oh, I'm gonna be back. This is a great angle, whatever bullshit. But the fact is, once your career, you feel like my career is over. Do you think Ric Flair thought like, well, I guess I'll be working at a welder in Charlotte. My uncle Philip said I could get a job welding metal. I mean, did you ever hear any stories like, yo, we have a job for you if things don't work out?
I never have, other than wrestling for him, or what his mindset was, or what he thought, or was he going to do something else? I don't. I have a feeling he's one of those guys. Like, nope, I'm Ric Flair. I'm going to be doing this forever. I don't care if I broke my back in 3 places. I'm going to wrestle. That's just the feeling I get from Flair. I don't remember it, but yeah, there you go, Pierce. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, man. I mean, after my wrestling career, which I'm still doing, but still after the fact, and I'm like, well, what I'm gonna do, and then I went to
But look at
college.
Flair now. He never even thought about doing anything else, period. You know what I mean? He just doing conventions, doing autograph signings, doing appearances, occasionally showing up on TV here and there. He never thought about doing anything else than being a wrestler.
Yeah, but back then there was no conventions, no Comic-Cons,
Oh, of course. Yeah, back then. Yeah, it just seemed like he was just getting ready to come back, and that's what he wanted to do. That's what he wanted to be.
I think the only thing back then was like gun shows and fucking, like Americana type of conventions, but I don't can visualize seeing a Comic-Con or, cosplay and stuff back then.
But he was even told that he wasn't going to wrestle again by the doctor, that he shouldn't wrestle again, and he did anyway. He just did a rigorous kind of return schedule, a rehab schedule, if you will, and he wanted to come back, if you will. So it seemed like he never not wanted to wrestle. I mean, to say you're not going to wrestle again by the doctor and then say, screw that, I'm going to go out of my way to make sure I can wrestle and I will wrestle, and I'm going to do whatever I can to rehab myself and be back in only 6 months' time. That shows you he just wanted to be a wrestler, and that's it.
And have a career that spans one of the greatest of all time careers. 16-time world champion. He really is in a lot of guys' eyes, the greatest guy to ever put on a pair of boots.
Now, just curiosity, John, since, like when they always do a little story, like, where are they now? What happened to so-and-so? I know he's dead. But after that plane crash, Johnny Valentine couldn't wrestle anymore. What was his career like afterwards? I mean, was he on some type of public assistance? Was he broke? Was he destitute? Even though his son was performing, still, I mean, how was he living his life after the fact of wrestling?
Not actually sure on that. I'm not sure. I know he was okay, but
Hold on a second.
besides the paralyzed back, but
That
obviously he never able to
John doesn't
wrestle.
know
Doesn't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm speechless right now.
Yeah.
Pierce, go ahead, man. I'm stumped. That threw me off.
I'm not sure about the personal life of Johnny Valentine.
The plethora of knowledge, man.
Yeah.
The Sultan of thought.
Yeah.
Did not
Doesn't know everything. Sometimes
doesn't know everything. Wow.
Some stuff I don't know.
You heard it here first.
Yes.
You heard it here. Well, I'm just curious, man, because a lot of people, become a shell of themselves. I'm not making fun of them. It's just like, like that time Ric Flair did the Access and he broke out in tears when they told him, when you love something so much and you can't do it no more, it kills you. So some people cannot, in the business, they can't, after wrestling, they don't know what else to do, and it destroys them. That's why they do the gimmicks and pop the drugs and fall down a deeper hole. So I didn't know where his depression was, if he had depression or, was he on public assistance because he couldn't work anymore and he only got this government check once a month. It's just curiosity where he fell.
So he was paralyzed, and after his paralysis, he remained active. Paralysis, sorry. He remained active in professional wrestling as a manager in Paul Bosek's Texas-based promotion. He managed Dale Hay, who competed as Dale Valentine in storyline that saw the two promoted as brothers. The storyline didn't last long, however. But Johnny Valentine, he debuted in 1947 and then obviously forced to retire in 1975. So 32-year career, man.
Huge star. Mid-Atlantic champion, United States champion, awesome feud with Wahoo McDaniel. Obviously, his son, Greg, became an absolute legend in the business, too. So they got quite a lineage and legacy, the Valentines.
No, absolutely. Valentine is still performing, not wrestling, but still making appearances. Still making a solid living. Johnny Valentine died. I don't know what year he died, but it was a while ago. It's just interesting how things just played out. How people's career, just a return of a key, everybody's destiny just changed. Because you never know where Ric Flair would have been if Johnny Valentine was able to walk, or they did make it, but his career flourished. Would have been a lot of angles with him and Johnny Valentine, to win that championship at the time. So it's just weird, what could have been, you always wonder,
even then, not to sort of discredit Valentine, though, he was at that stage, you'd say he was the veteran. You know what I mean? He'd been a 32-year career is still a long time to be in the business.
Well, for Flair?
No, for Valentine.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was thinking of Flair.
Yeah. He was kind of winding it down anyway, it seemed like that was kind of towards the end of his run. And this was kind of the start of Greg's run, really. You know what I mean? He was kind of starting to retire. Greg's coming up. It's time for the next generation of guys like Flair and eventually Steamboat and a bunch of the other guys who were starting to come up at that time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like I said, but that's his choice. That's his, when you have your career and you have to tail end, you make that determination when you're going to retire, not the sands of time and fate, and that's the thing, I guess, is probably really bothering him that he was no longer able to, finish. I had a friend who did judo, right? And he was in a competition for a championship, and he was the number one ranked judoka, and he was supposed to go to Vegas, and he said he was going to finish off his career at this tournament because he wanted to be number one. And then he's a cop, and he got into a car crash and injured his ankle, and he had his ankle fused, so he couldn't do judo anymore. And he was very depressed because he goes, man, I worked so hard to get where I'm at, to compete at the finals, to see if I was able to beat all those guys, to finally retire at the top of my game, to say, man, I can, fulfilled my dream. And he was depressed for a while. So it's, it does affect you, man. You leave on your terms, not the hands of Father Time, whatever, to stop your career. You make that decision, not them.
100%.
All right.
100%.
Yeah, you want to walk out on your own terms.
guys, we are at that time. We have gone through that 45-minute mark. We have covered off. We will make our way around the room and just get final thoughts. John, starting with you, what were your final thoughts on this case?
Pretty just scary if you think about it, because like David Crockett, Ric Flair, Johnny Valentine, Tim Woods, Bobby Bruggers, all huge legends of business. Like, what happens if they all died in that crash? Like, the business would have been so much different without Flair, without David Crockett, who was a big part of WCW behind the scenes. I don't know if people realize that, and did a lot of production for them for many, many years. Was a good announcer, despite, maybe some people would say he's not, but I thought he was a great announcer. Obviously, co-owner of JCP. I mean, there's so many different things. Flair, the GOAT, you don't have the greatest of all time. Where does Starrcade land? Where the NWA land? Where, all these legendary feuds and legendary matches. I mean, so many different things could have changed and changed the trajectory, all because of the plane crash, all because the guy didn't put enough fuel in because it was too heavy. Crazy, scary, scary incident. Man, like, who knows what could have happened, but all things considered, David Crockett and Ric Flair are pretty damn lucky.
Well, I mean, I really don't have any final thoughts. I mean, I already said what I needed to say in regards to, like, what could have been these athletes if they would have not been in that plane crash. What would their career have changed differently compared to what it is now? I mean, it happened to the positive part, but would it still have been the same if things would have, if they would have landed in Wilmington without a scratch? What stories and what angles would have played out during those years? It was fucked up. It is what it is. I mean, that's why I don't fly single engine planes. I won't do it. And I mean, Ric Flair's here. He's here to stay. I mean, he's still styling and profiling. Johnny Valentine passed away. Jim Crockett's still around. So, God bless him. This is the part where you talk, Pierce.
Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to tune in next week for case number 104. We will be bringing you another amazing episode. This next week will be Austin walking out of the WWE in 2002. So make sure you tune in for that. You can get an exclusive first look at all episodes of Wrestling with Tragedy by subscribing to the Russo's brand. Go check out channelattitude.com, russosbrand.com, and patreon.com/RussoTWC. You can also find us on all podcasting platforms and on YouTube. So do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And also make sure you check out our sponsors, healthape.com and sleeves.com. Use promo code MWAPOD to get a 10% discount on your final purchase.
I just realized something. I mean, before we cut the show off short, I think we should do a show on. I just found out recently that WWE pulled the marijuana policy in WWE. I just saw that recently, and it's kind of weird that they pulled that.
It was a hoax.
It was a hoax?
Yeah, it was
April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
Oh, I just saw it just a few minutes ago. I looked and I'm like, what? I want to look into that. All right, fuck it.
Matt Riddle did backflips.
Oh, well, I mean, anyway, everyone, we'll see you guys next week. We do appreciate you for supporting Wrestling with Tragedy. John, is always a pleasure, even though today was a day. You sure it's not an April Fool's joke that you didn't know that?
Maybe.
That question? Okay, it could be. Anyway, we'll see you guys next week.
This is Vince Russo's The Brand.